Hello, this is our second module, if you want to call it that, for World Civilizations. And like I mentioned, this is going to be done every other day. Trying to keep your load a little bit lighter. I think in general now that things are, I guess this is the first official day of school dismissal and that we're doing things online. You have had since Monday, I think we benefited from having your assignment due Monday and now today. I think that's been a benefit where we were finishing that up and students were turning it in. Anywho, from here on out, we'll follow that same module practice of like every other day, follow along with the notes. And like I said, we'll see how the 30th, Monday the 30th is. We have the 30th and 31st back here at the school before spring break. Spring break, from what we have been told, is still scheduled as is, and that for the spring break experience, you're not expected to be doing any work. Enjoy spring break. Still, I guess, in social distancing probably by that time. But I'm sure we'll have more instruction on if we indeed will be back here in a face-to-face venue on the 30th and 31st. But in the meantime, we'll still follow that same pattern back and forth. As a side note for the assignment, the travel agency assignment, that's due today, as was mentioned in the email, and that will be due. What we'll do is really by the end of today, and I'll be grading them and so forth starting tomorrow. So you want to make sure you follow through and turn that in. I'm not going to be too, you guys know my late work policy, I'm not too stringent and prescriptive on that. But I hope that you follow through with it. I'm trying to do the load of this. It's a little lighter than what you would see, right, in a face-to-face class. But I hope that you take advantage of it in a good way. I'm not trying to overload you, but still do the little that I do ask that you do. Namely notes and the assignment and getting ready for the test on the 31st. That's some of the housekeeping things. I hope that makes sense. And now we're into our next section of world civilizations, being Iran. Now we finished up Nigeria last time. I think we finished those notes up. We're all good. This is where you'll follow along in the document that I sent you. And you have that document on Iran. I think it's going to be front and back and then another page to write. So I guess 3 total pages of the document. Whether you do it digitally or if you handwrite it, that's fine. But what I need from you is to follow along in that section. So we've already talked about Islam, and this is going to be crucial because in Nigeria it exemplified, I think, 2 of those layers. Remember the whole the Islamic world is sort of like ogres and Shrek, that they're layered and like onions. So you have that center core layer, which isn't necessarily the center of their universe, but in terms of the size of it, it's not very big, and that is 5 to 10% Islamic extremists. They're going through that right now, jihadists. Then you're going to have the larger layer around it, which is a little bit bigger, 10, 15%, 20% of the Islamic world follows Sharia. And then you have the expansive one, 80% of the Islamic world follows the 5 tenets or pillars of their faith, which are very, very peaceful. We mentioned all of that. So with Nigeria, and this is where I'd ask questions, and you guys would throw ideas out and get some points. But for Nigeria, it exemplified 2 of those 3, and I guess all 3, because you had Boko Haram, which is very much the Islamic extremist, that ISIS, Al-Qaeda, Hamas group that is very intense. Jihadists, a literal war waged against sin or infidels. And then you also had Sharia up north in Nigeria, not the whole country, but up north a lot of them follow Sharia, which is the strict adherence to a very prescriptive code, specifically against women, saying that they're sub-citizens. They're not full citizens. They're more like property, children, dependents type thing that must be controlled, contained, as well as dietary and dress restrictions, but mainly for women. So we saw that in Nigeria. There were many peaceful Islamic participants as well. but we've covered all three in one country. In Iran, we're going to get to the first layer, the core. We're not going to focus on as much. They don't have direct connection to terrorist agencies. However, Iran as a whole country, the whole country, and geographically, I'm sure you guys covered this in Knowles or Eborn's class, it's a huge country. Middle East, geographically, I mean, you look at Saudi Arabia and Iran, and that's it. I mean, no offense to Jordan or Kuwait or even Iraq, but they're just not as big geographically. So when you look at those two countries, and specifically with Iran, they're the only Islamic country in the world that has Sharia as their country-wide goal, law, etc. They're the only one. Saudi Arabia practices it at times. Nigeria practices it in the north. But Iran is a very good distillation of what is Sharia. What does it look like? Just like, and I don't want to make the reference that like Utah's codes and religious ideas are similar to Sharia's codes, but if you're looking for how does Latter-day Saint culture work, you look at Utah. You don't necessarily look at Arizona or Idaho, even though there's a preponderance of people who practice that religion as well. But you look at Utah, culturally. Iran is that for Sharia. They make a huge part of that 20% of the Islamic world, if you will. 15% or so who practice Sharia. So just know that in general, Iran's going to be helpful for that second phase. I guess in Nigeria we covered all three. Are there people in Iran who practice Islam who are not fans of Sharia? Yes, you will see. In fact, we'll get to that in notes. There's probably two main sections of Iran. One that is more open to reform, and one that's more like a religious conservative. And so it's maybe at best like a 60-40 split. 60% more religious conservatives and 40% secular reformers, which we'll get to what that means eventually. But yeah, even though they're told to follow Sharia, I guess maybe an Amish community might be the better way to say it. Are there people in certain Amish communities in Ohio or Western Pennsylvania or Delaware or whatever who are part of the community but don't abide as strict as they should? Yeah, Iran has that. But as a country, in terms of legal code, they have that. Okay, so this is where I'd also ask some questions in the context of Iran. Anybody out there know, out in the nether sphere, maybe Caleb would, or I don't know. Anybody out there know what type of government it is where you have the head of the main religion and the head of the government as the same person? Like, what is that called? It's not democracy. And Chrissy, if you ever look at, in fact, as you can sort of see up there in my lovely government and political spectrum thing, sort of, as you look at those spectrums, Chrissy, it means in the Greek version people, or rather governing style. Democracy means people governing. Just keep in mind, that's what it means. So on that topic, I know out there somebody has thought of or looked it up on their phone or whatever already, that it's theocracy. Just to know, that's what Iran is. It's one of the few theocracies in the world today, where the head, that's the main defining characteristic. Not that a country is religious. No. That the head of the main religion is also the head of government. That is the distinguishing characteristic. Because then people say, well, Utah's a theocracy because we're mainly Latter-day Saints. No, that's true, but think about it. The head of the Latter-day Saint Church is going to be Russell M. Nelson. Is he the governor of Utah? No. But for some more points, can you guys think historically of a time that this area was a theocracy? Ding, 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 ding. Yeah, Brigham Young, when he was the governor, the head of the territory of Deseret. Theocracies don't have to be bad. The Vatican is a theocracy. It's this big, but I guess I should have said it like that so you can see the size I'm talking about. It's very small. The Vatican's very small, but what's the main religion? Catholicism. Who's the head of that? The Pope. What's the head of the government's name? The Pope. Like, they're two and the same. That's what it is. Saudi Arabia isn't considered a theocracy because they're ruled more or less by princes. And those princes in a monarchy style, they all follow Islam. They're all, as you'll find, what's called, they're Sunni, as opposed to Iran, a different sect of Islam. And they follow, some parts follow Sharia, but they don't follow a blanket statement. And more importantly, the leaders are the disconnect. The religious leader that Saudi Arabia looks to is not also really the head of government, the princes. And some might say, well, wait a second, Mr. Peer, that the Queen of England, the king or queen, the monarch of England, is also the head of the Anglican Church. Yes, and I would give fake points up here if we were doing points. That is true, that they are. However, that's in name or nominally. Nowadays, Anglicanism, or the Church of England, it's practiced, but the role by the monarch as the religious head is not used. Whereas in Iran, it is. Now, if you went back to King Henry VIII, yes, you could deem that a theocracy. But now it's not really. It's more of a token thing. The religious responsibilities have been delegated, whereas in Iran, it is very much two and the same. So just be aware of that. That's a theocracy. Iran's unique in that. So with Iran, it's a gateway to all the Middle East, and understanding all about Islam more. Hopefully the Middle East doesn't seem as unknown or scary or what have you. And and also not just that it's not scary, but that you'll understand how Iran's story fits in with all these other countries, because generally people in the U.S. say, oh, if we could only have peace in the Middle East. What does that mean? We can throw our hands up and offer a prayer, but if we're not knowing the problem and being able to solve it, then it might just be a face value wish. Okay, so that's about theocracy. That's about how it compares to Nigeria, the different levels of Islam that we'll get to, namely the second one about Sharia. And a side note I'll mention here, just off the bat, Iran is one of those 5 countries in the world right now who are really struggling with COVID-19. And there's some truth to that. I think you have a rough time for them, for better or worse, whatever reasoning why they've had, so sort of like China, then Iran, then Italy, and then like the rest of the world. And geographically, there could be some explanations later on, but just as a side note, they're dealing with it much more than Saudi Arabia or Southeast Asia or Africa. Africa had its Ebola scares a couple years ago, and now we're dealing with a different thing. With that said, shifting into the leaders. So you guys know at the top of your notes, at the very top, before we get into A New Hope, that first section, we'll get to A New Hope today. We're going to finish it up today. But before we get to that, at the very top, in the margins, like you did for Nigeria, we're going to write down about 4 leaders' names that you'll have. And I'll give you the spelling, and you'll just write those names down, because on the test, hint, 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 those leaders' names are going to be important. Okay? So the first leader, and I have printed off pictures here, so it's sort of interesting. This guy, woo, it's like show and tell. This guy's name is Ayatollah Khomeini. Wow. Okay, how do you spell that? Ayatollah. That's Ayatollah. And Khomeini. The spelling I'll give you could differ from other textbooks because, as you'll see in a second, it's strange. But the spelling that I'll accept is Khomeini. Khomeini. Okay, Ayatollah is not a name, it's a title. Ayatollah is the equivalent of saying the Prophet Russell M. Nelson, the Prophet Thomas S. Monson, right? These are names attached to a leader's title, which is Ayatollah. Ayatollah is their imam, or their religious leader, their prophet, their pope. These are all very loose comparisons, but it's their leader, their religious leader. Ayatollah is that. That's their religious leader. So by the name alone, you see he was not just the religious leader, but he was also the Ayatollah, is then seen as the governmental leader. All of the power, everything stems through the Ayatollah. And again, that's Ayatollah Khomeini. He was the one who led the revolution in 1979 to turn Iran from a democracy into a theocracy. All right, so a lot of times you'll see pictures where it's like they took a step back. They were more of a democratic thing, and that's what makes Iran so interesting. Is unlike Nigeria, where they haven't had democracy, the Qajars specifically in Iran had like 50 plus years of democracy. They had a flipping constitution that they still sort of use, and it wasn't a bad constitution. It was that people got desperate in the 60s and 70s by a group of the Shahs, or the Shah, which was just military dictators, and they said anybody to overthrow them. In this case, it was Khomeini. He overthrew them. He was a charismatic leader, and he did in 1979. So Khomeini, 1979, takeover. That's what you write down. The second name you'll write down is so in 89 or so, Khomeini died. He's gone. The country was at a loss because, and I don't, it's so hard because I don't want to say like religion in Utah or the Latter-day Saint Church is similar to Islam or Sharia Islam. No. That's not what I'm saying. But to help people here as students understand it, for those of you who've been to seminary class and you see individuals talk about when Joseph Smith was martyred, he was a martyr, what would be the succession line at that point? That's what Iran went through, and they decided initially they were going to have only one Ayatollah. After that, it would like revert to clerics or some council or what have you. They decided to not do that and go with another Ayatollah. They put, I think it's 40 amendments in their constitution to allow another Ayatollah. This is the current Ayatollah. Since 89, this guy has been the Ayatollah. Now, I get it. A lot of you are saying, but Mr. Pierre, they look so similar. We got this guy, we got that guy. Remember the glasses. Okay? The guy with the glasses is the current Ayatollah. Remember his leader. That's the name of the position. And then his actual name is Khomeini. Now you're thinking, are you kidding me, Pierre? That's the exact same name. All right. This is how we're going to break it down. There is Khomeini, as in year zero, the start of it all, year zero, start of it, okay, when you're numbering something. And then I overpronounce the A to make it very clear that there is an A in this guy's name. So Ayatollah, how do you spell his name? The second guy is Khomeini. It's Khaamenei. That's Khomeini. Okay. You'll hear me say in the, I'll try to overpronounce the A. It's not phonetic of what they usually do. They'll say Khomeini. But for us, I'm going to say Khomeini, like an A, like make it very, very clear that it's an A. Khomeini. And in fact, like most people's noses look like an A, some have said that look at his nose, it looks like an A. There you go. So Khomeini is the current Ayatollah, and the guy's old, man. It's going to be rough. If he dies, there is going to be challenges to leadership, potential problems. They've set a pattern of a new Ayatollah, but they only had two, and both have been religious conservatives, very much religious conservatives. And maybe Khomeini more so than Khomeini, but there's that. Now, this is the weird thing. A lot of people get stuck on this. I'm sure I would say this. Iran has a dual executive. Not only do they have an Ayatollah, a supreme leader, that's the other name for it. Ayatollah really translated means supreme leader. You can't get any more Star Wars than that. They also have, and I hate to use a Star Wars reference here, but it helps students out. There's a supreme leader, the Emperor Palpatine, whatever. And then there is the right-hand man to the Emperor, which is Darth Vader in this case. Emperor Snoke, Kylo Ren, right? That's how the Galactic Empire, whatever, worked. The First Order worked and stuff. There is the Emperor and the right-hand man. In this case, the right-hand man is still elected, questionably maybe, but elected by the people and is called a president. So this is what's weird. When we say President Trump, we're like, oh, that's the buck stops with him or her, whoever the president is. That's not the case in Iran. The buck stops eventually with the Ayatollah, but they do have a right-hand man person to do this, and that's what you're going to write down in this section. They have had many presidents since 1979, but they've had two that we're going to write about, the two most recent ones. Okay, this is the first guy. All right, chose a funny picture of him just because this guy never wears a tie. Never. Don't know why. His name is Ahmadinejad. Whoa, okay, Ahmadinejad. How do you spell it? Ahmadinejad. Ahmadinejad. All right, and again on the test, if you can get close to it, the spelling, that's cool. What do you need to know about him? Religious conservative. He was I hate to say Darth Vader. He was a Darth Vader. And then you got like this other president when he served his 2 terms of 4 years. When he was out, the people in the pendulum swing went, okay, we're going to go with a more moderate guy. And so you have, I don't want to say like emo Kylo Ren, but let's say that. This is the current president, President Rouhani. Rouhani. I chose a picture of him. He's happier. He is a moderate, meaning he's in the middle. He's not totally like, let's reform everything, but he's not as religious conservative as what we saw with Ahmadinejad. All right? So you have Khomeini with the A nose. Both of them were Ayatollahs. And then you have the right-hand people, the right-hand person, who is the president, President Ahmadinejad, who then served his terms, and then I got to do my math correct here. Since 2013, 2013, Rouhani has been president. Yep, and still is in Iran. Okay, so there's that. Now we're going to go through A New Hope a little bit quickly because I want to spend time on the leaders' names. You got those names down? Cool. Awesome. Under A New Hope, so you have the margin stuff, and then underneath it, there's going to be a total of 5 total things you're going to write down. 5. Okay, 5 bullet points, if you will. The first one is, the new hope for Iran is that half of all of its population has been born since 1979. Half of all of its population has been born since 1979. I would ask a question here, why does that matter? Young people protest more. That's why the rest of the world's like hoping, come on. I know you might not know any better, but you're also more open to change. So when you're on social media, you see people like democracy, voting, female rights, what? These youthful protesters could be a source of change. All right, so in that first bullet point again, the new hope for Iran is that half of all Iranians alive today have been born since the revolution of 1979. These youthful protesters could be a source of change. Yes, I hope some of you who are Star Wars geeks, I got a brother who is a Star Wars geek. Holy mackerel. That saga can do no wrong. I would disagree. I think there's some good things, but anywho. On to more important matters, that Baby Yoda dough. That's a good thing. But moving beyond Baby Yoda, I did entitle it A New Hope because it's the Star Wars ideas. It does help students understand the Islamic Iranian government style when they think of the Galactic Empire. It really does. So then the new hope could be, new twins born. And not just males, but also females. Those who are younger are more open to change. They're more optimistic. When you get old, politically speaking, people they're not as open usually to change or protests. So that's why it's a new hope, is the younger generation. Whereas in the U.S., no. Our population curve, and that's what makes COVID-19 so dangerous, is we have, for every one of you, there's basically 12 old people. And I say that, Generation X, Y, and Z, our generations it's the baby boom generation. That's a challenge. It's a real challenge to deal with. Not so in Iran. They have a ton of young people, and the curve is a little more balanced, if you will. It's not all skewed to one side of the age range. So they're more open to change. Okay, the second thing you write down is, on a related note, the Iranian government has sponsored state contraceptive facilities. The Iranian government has sponsored state contraceptive facilities. I'm not a health teacher, I'm not going to get into biology, but when we say contraception, we're talking about birth control, condoms, diaphragms, etc. And the state taxpayer dollars would go into it, as well as family planning, not abortion. Unlike China's we'll get to, Iran has never endorsed state abortion. But they reinterpreted Sharia code to allow contraceptives, to allow that, family planning, because they have so many young people, they don't want to have too many young people, right? Iran's a developing country, population problems are more so with them than they are, say, with the US or Germany, where we actually need people to have more kids. Utah is the exception, but as a country, people don't have a lot of kids in developed countries. So Iran has tried to curtail the number of young people. You could get skeptical and say, see, that's the proof that they don't want you to, yeah, that's the proof they don't want you to have more kids because they don't want to have protesters. That could be it, but it's also a drain on resources. Okay, the third thing you're going to write down is protests by the youth are happening. As an example, in March of 2007, hundreds of men and women gathered to celebrate International Women's Day. Hundreds of men and women gathered to celebrate International Women's Day. The police brutally beat these protesters in the streets. The police brutally beat these protesters in the streets. That's your third thing. Oh man, it's been almost 13 years since that's happened. This was known International Women's Day, for those of you who were paying attention last week. I think it was last Monday. And so talk about gender inequality. I guess even International Women's Day was curtailed in favor of COVID. Women didn't get their time for celebration, I suppose. But in Iran, they really didn't get their time for celebration. In Iran, they struggled with it, and those men and women were beaten. Some were executed later on for not protesting. They were just gathering in the streets to commemorate it. And by having gender equality, that's then not seen in Sharia as acceptable, because women, remember, with Sharia codes have to be accompanied to and from marketplaces. They have to have chaperones. International travel, they have to be strictly chaperoned. Burqas are completely required, covering hair, yes, as well as long coats and long pants. Wow, I mean, that's intense. But they beat those people in the streets. The Basij, their lowest level of military, did it. All right. Fourth thing, that we're going to write down here is, to make matters worse, in the 2009 presidential election, many protesters questioned the shady results. Which led to a young girl named Neda, N-E-D-A, waving a green flag in protest. So to make matters worse, there were many protesters who were questioning the shady results of the 2009 election, which led to a young girl named Neda waving a green flag in protest. Green flag was important because there was Ahmadinejad. Now, as a reminder, just to show you the picture again, this guy, he was up for re-election in 2009. He was, as you'll see, very much a religious conservative. And the country isn't split even, but there's a big 30-40% of them who are open to change. They weren't a fan of him being that Darth Vader type figure. And so they protested, and they pushed for this other guy to win who was part of, well, doesn't matter his party name because it's changed since then, but that party had the color green as their party. And as they were protesting about this color, or about the party, this girl Neda, keep writing here in the fourth part, she was shot in cold blood by one of Ahmadinejad's guard. And that was so sad. Neda became this Les Mis type figure. Neda was killed. It was caught on live TV. They had a still. It was sent throughout, internationally. And Neda, who was, I believe, 18, she died, and she became a rallying cry for these individuals. who said sometimes when violence happens and a group suppresses a protest, it scatters, especially in authoritarian regimes where they'll just roll tanks over you. They thought that would happen, but it didn't. Neda was a symbol. She was young and she was killed, and it was just so unnecessary, and it totally seemed like this Revolutionary Guard member, one of the special elite forces for Ahmadinejad, killed her in cold blood, shot her in the chest, that they should be held accountable. The guy was never held accountable. And so more protests happened. More protests happened, and more people got upset. And which led to the fifth and final thing you'll write down in this section, and that is these youthful protesters were finally contained through both imprisonment and execution. They were finally contained through both imprisonment and execution, as the Ayatollah said they, quote, vaccinated the country against these germs, end quote. Quote, vaccinated the country against these germs, end quote. And I want you to be thinking, this is where I'd ask some points and questions and stuff. Who can make the analogy? What is the Ayatollah trying to say here? And the answer, you're totally right. Random student who answered that is critical thinking, independent thought can spread like a disease. Once somebody does it and stands up, it can light a fire in other people. And that's what's hard in this whole teaching process, is a lot of times we think teaching is about filling a bucket. Here's knowledge. I mean, will Iran stuff matter to you? I think it will internationally, especially if anybody goes overseas. But it's supposed to be more about lighting a fire than filling a bucket. And critical thinking and independent thought is just that. And so the disease, the germs, even though you can't vaccinate against a germ as much, but anyway, to vaccinate against the germs means they wanted to eradicate critical thinking. But as you'll see, spoiler alert, they didn't effectively vaccinate these germs all the way. They went into hiding, but in 2013 you'll see that the Green Movement, this whole process is called the Green Movement because of the Green Party. They were waving green flags, green pins, everything like that. Came back to help elect Rouhani, okay, which we'll get to later. Spoiler alert, I know you guys are so excited about it. All right, so that's it. We'll see. I may have... Yeah, I think that's good for today. We've covered enough about the leaders. We have all the different ideas of people being born a ton since 79, so they have a lot of young people there to balance it out, but it's also concern for the government, so they said, hey, contraceptives, because we don't have too many youthful protesters. And then they did protest with International Women's Day. They had protests for Green Movement, and both were crushed. Green Movement was more bloody in their crushing of it. And as you look at the Green Movement, you also want to look at the idea, what increases democracy and what decreases democracy, hint, 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 for the test. So that's where we'll leave off. We'll get to women's rights and politics next time. So have a good one. Keep that social isolation up. And thanks all you subscribers out there, because I appreciate it. Because now I'm getting like 40 views, and before you know it, just tell all your friends. Just keep hitting that like and subscribe button, hit the notification button, and I could be rolling in it just like I did in the law days. Oh man, this is great. Maybe I should do something with makeup too, I don't know. Anyway, have a good one. We'll see you. Bye.